Hey everybody, this is Dream, and I am back now, so we should be doing videos regular every day again. Sorry about that, guys. I had a funeral. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into this slate. We have a 7-game slate. I know it says 8, but the LA Dodgers Cincinnati Reds game is no longer a part of this slate like it was. So do keep that in mind here. So make sure not to use those players. With that said, let's go ahead and get into our pitching today. So we have some really good plays on the slate so far. We're going to start with Chris Sale here for Atlanta. He has been absolutely fantastic so far this season. He started the season a little bit rocky, but he got into going, and now he's been over 33 fantasy points in 3 straight games, and that wasn't against terrible teams all that bad either. So he's been fantastic, and he's got a great matchup here against Pittsburgh. Uh, and he has the best K rate and the best earned runs against potential on this slate. And so he has also had 7 wins and 9 starts, and he's been over 6 straight over 24 fantasy points. K rate should be the top on the slate in general, so I think he's a great play on the slate. He is expensive, but he is the top overall option. Another guy I like quite a bit today is Kyle Bradish for Baltimore. He's facing the White Sox, who've been abysmal. Now, he hasn't pitched a ton of games yet this season, but he's been pretty good in them, and he has a decent enough K rate. If he can get over 5 strikeouts, he can definitely pay off here. That might be a little bit risky here, but he definitely draws some good potential. His price is a little higher than I'd like it to be, though, but he does have a good opportunity to get a win finally. The offense for the Orioles has not been particularly great when he's drawn the start, and he hasn't always gone a ton of innings with the pitch count, but uh, with his pitches being a lot. But he is getting a lot of opportunities to get strikeouts, and that does give him a lot of potential in this one. Some other options I like today, Tanner Hoke for Boston. Now, he does have a rough matchup against Milwaukee, and I do like some bats from Milwaukee, but they are pretty expensive today, and they're definitely fadeable. And then if you want to go with a secondary option as a GPP play, then he's definitely a good one to go. He's been absolutely fantastic so far when it comes to earned run average, at least, and he's been getting decent strikeouts for the most part. Um, though he did have a string of 3 games where he got losses in close games, but I do think he's got a good opportunity here. Wu for Seattle, also interesting here against Washington. Now, I do like a few Washington bats, but he has been good so far this season. His pitch count is continuously rising now. It looks like he's going to have some good opportunity here against the Nationals, though I do like a couple of bats from the Nationals. I think he's definitely a viable option, though he does need to get over 5 or 6 strikeouts to really pay off here. Then we're going to look at Crochet for the White Sox. Now, he's got a tough matchup with Baltimore. He's definitely a Hail Mary option, but he's been one of the best pitchers that the White Sox have had this season, and he's been fantastic in the last 4 starts at least. And so he's a GPP play, though it is a high risk, high reward situation. He does have one of the best strikeout rates on this slate outside of Chris Sale, at least, so he does draw some opportunity there. Bradley for Tampa Bay has only pitched a couple games so far, but he's been really solid in the 3 games. Though he did face Boston and the Yankees in those 3, and now he gets now he gets Kansas City, who's also a pretty tough matchup. But he's been good in the strikeouts so far. I don't project his strikeouts to be quite as good today, but I do think he has some viability today. So he's a fair GPP play. And then Sean Manaea for the Mets. He's got a good matchup against San Francisco. This game is at home for the Mets, so that does give him a little bit of uh, feel good area, but he hasn't been better at home than on the road, actually. So I do think he's a risky play, but he definitely has that 15 to 20 fantasy point range. And an extreme play would be a Webb for San Francisco against the Mets. He's been pretty good, but he's been somewhat inconsistent on the season, so he's kind of a bit of a best play. And the strikeout rate has also been inconsistent, so he's kind of a high risk, high reward. Pablo Lopez from Minnesota. I mean, he does draw good metrics for this game, but it is a tough matchup against Texas. Also, Phil's been robust, similar to Logan Webb, so I think he's pretty avoidable unless you just want to go with the Hail Mary approach. Pitching is pretty good today, but we do have a lot of bats we do like as well. But so let's go and get started in that. So we're going to look at our catchers first. Mitch Garver is going to be a top overall option. He has struggled this season, but he does have home run upside in the slate, and so he's definitely a viable play, and he is a core option for me. But his teammate Cal Raleigh is a contrarian play off of him. He's also hit a lot of home runs this season. If whoever ends up starting, or if one of them may DH today, but both of them have a lot of upside. The Garver's metrics are just better today quite frankly. Looking at Ruiz for the Wizards, Wizards for the Nationals. He does draw good metrics today. I think the Nationals have good upside on the slate, even though I do like the pitching woo a little bit. The Nationals have some potential on this one, and so they're definitely worth a secondary type stack. Travis d'Arnaud also looks fantastic today from a metrics perspective, and he's got a good match against Pittsburgh. I think Atlanta is going to be a very dangerous team on the slate. He's definitely one of the better options, and he's not one of the cheaper options on the team as well. Connor Wong for Boston also draws good metrics at this position. It's a pretty good position today, and Wong has a lot of upside in it. He's got a good matchup here against Milwaukee as well. So uh, he's one of the better options if you don't want to use Garver or Raleigh. Now you could go with a William Contreras, Adley Rutschman, or Salvador Perez, but I don't really think you need to pay up at this slate simply because it's got such a good price. So many guys that are good priced on this one, and so you can pay down and get viable opportunities to pay up at other positions. Looking at first base, Ryan Mountcastle jumps off the page as the top overall guy. He's been pretty good so far this season. Baltimore does have a tough matchup here, but I do think they're going to have some guys that get some hits. And he's not super expensive, so he's definitely an interesting play on the slate. I also like Jake Bowers for Milwaukee, who might be a little bit safer today than Mountcastle at least. He's been a little bit inconsistent so far this season, but the metrics are absolutely fantastic today, and he's a good contrarian play off of Mountcastle at first base. He can also move in the outfield as well. Looking at some value plays here, we like Ty France for Seattle, as Seattle is facing Patrick Corbin, who has really struggled so far this season, and he's been struggling for a couple of seasons for that matter. So he's definitely going to be in play today as a dirt cheap option at $3,100. Garrett Cooper, oopsie, for Boston. If he was to draw the start today, uh, he hasn't started the last few games, but he does draw good metrics for this game. And if he does start, then he'll be somebody to consider as a dirt cheap play as well. Connor Joe for Pittsburgh is a high risk, high reward play, kind of a one off for Pittsburgh, who could some get a good hit here against Sale or in the latter innings against the bullpen. Joey Gallo for Washington, also very interesting today. He's got a bit robust position today as kind of a Hail Mary approach at this position. Now, again, this position is fairly deep with the value plays, so you don't really need to pay up a lot here. But if you wanted to, you could look at Matt Olson as a good viable choice. Looking at second base, this is where we're going to start to get some more expensive options available that have really good upside. Ozzy Albies looks solid today. Now, he really hasn't been as good as he started the season since he came back from his injury, but he does have good metrics today, and while he is pricey, he is a viable choice. Bryce Terang may be a bit safer today as he's been fantastic lately. He's had some really big games when he's managed to draw starts, and he's been good against Boston this season. I look for him to be a solid opportunity today to have a good game, and he's a little bit cheaper than Albies, so he's a definitely interesting option. I also like Dylan Moore, uh, who can play second base or shortstop. He's just $4,000, and he is a pretty good play today. He's been pretty good lately, and he's drawing some really good metrics as a result. I think he's a risk. He's not very risky on this slate because of his price. Jorge Polanco is a good value play for Seattle as well, and he's only $3,300. Now, he struggled more than Dylan Moore, but he's definitely a contrarian option on the slate. Julian for Minnesota, he's a little bit pricey, but he's been good so far this season. He's been kind of been bust most games, but he does have that home run upside, which definitely gives him some potential on this one. Von Grissom can also be a good position player here. He's very high risk, high reward, but he's dirt cheap, and so he's kind of a Hail Mary play that you can kind of throw in, and hopefully he can get you a few fantasy points at the very least if you need to pay up for other positions. And then Luis Garcia Jr., he's my second favorite play from Washington outside of C.J. Abrams, and he's been fantastic lately. He's been pretty good on the season even, so I think he's a great option here. Even if you use blue, he could be a good one-off potential guy. Looking at third base, Devers um, has been on an absolute tear lately. Now, he did have a couple games where he didn't score double figures, but he's still got that upside, and he's been seeing the ball very well. good hitter and has a lot of opportunity in this game to have a really solid upside game because Boston's one of my favorite teams on this entire slate. Then we'll look at Garcia for Kansas City. Now, he is a little bit riskier today. The metrics are not as good as I typically like them to be, but this position is rather weak today, so he's definitely in play, but he has some concern on the slate. He's a little higher risk than I would like at his price point, but he's definitely viable here. Westberg, though, does draw really good metrics for this game. He can play second or third base. I didn't mention him as second base because there's so many good options there, but third base is a lot tougher, and he's definitely a viable play. Isaac Paredes is a good option if you want to go with Tampa Bay. He's definitely going to be my favorite play from that team. I'll show you that in the stacks here in a bit, but he's definitely the best option at this position from Tampa Bay. Matt Chapman uh, is also in play for San Francisco against Manaea. He's been pretty solid so far this season. He's been up and down, but he definitely draws good metrics here. It has some home run upside as well. Now that third base is really rough. There's no sub $4,500 or $4,400 plays. I do think Devers is a top tier option along with Westberg, but Chapman I actually like him a little bit more than Garcia, so do keep that in mind. Looking at shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr. obviously super expensive, but has been absolutely fantastic this season. He does need a hit home run to pay off this price point, but he's definitely in the cards today as he does draw that fantastic metrics. CJ Abrams also looking fantastic today, though he is high risk, high reward, and he's been a lot less consistent than Bobby Witt Jr., and he's not a ton cheaper, which is a little bit disappointing today. Looking at Corey Seager, though, he's been hitting some really good games lately, and he's drawn some really good metrics again here against Minnesota. So we'll have to wait and see, but I think he's going to be a great option on the slate. But if you want to save some money here, there's a lot of good ways to do that. Dylan Moore, who I already mentioned at second base, can play here at shortstop, and he's fantastic metrics. If you want to go super cheap, Crawford for Seattle also fits in here at $3,300, but he's probably not my favorite cheap option. Romy Gonzalez, though, from Boston is, as he hasn't hit on run this season, but he's hitting the ball decently well. And in certain moments, he can score some fantasy points, and he's dirt cheap at $2,700. Maybe the outfielders. We have a lot of outfielders that are likable today, and the top two are going to be Acuna and Christian Yelich as they draw the best metrics for the top expensive plays. But after those two, there's really not much unless you get sub $4,500, which is really good because the slate is full of really solid options at this position. So Mitch Haniger for Seattle, he is a core play for me. He has been struggling so far this season, but he does draw good home run upside metrics here, and he is that guy that I'm going to try to roster quite a bit, especially because he's cheap at $3,500, or sorry, $3,400. And then Rob Refsnyder. Refsnyder is a guy that you want in certain situations, and this is about the best situation he's had so far this season. So he's going to be somebody that I really like quite a bit here. Now, there's plenty of other options that you can utilize outside these two, but Sal Frelick, for instance, from Milwaukee, he's got absolutely fantastic metrics for this game. Really happy to see him there as a good option here, and his price is fair. Jorge Soler for San Francisco against Manaea has some good metrics. Not as good as these other guys, but he does have some solid opportunity. Jaron Duran for Boston. He's a little bit pricey today, but he does draw good upside on this one. He's also hit the ball very well lately. I'm also going to look at Jake Bowers again here at who can play at first base. I think he fits better at first base, but if you want to pay up a little bit more at this outfield position, he's definitely a way to go. And Santander from Baltimore uh, really does look like a fantastic option today, and he's another guy that I was really trying to figure out how to fit him as a core play. There's just too many good options here at the outfield, so you could switch out Refsnyder or Haniger and then put in Santander here. But either way, I think Santander is definitely somebody you have to consider as a fill-in outfielder if you have the money to do it. Kepler is interesting for Minnesota, but he definitely carries some risk today. We still don't exactly know how the pitching is going to work out for Texas either, so do keep that in mind. Nemo is in play for the Mets as he does draw some good metrics, but he's high risk, high reward on the slate. Connor Joe has a tough matchup here against Pittsburgh, but he can play first base or outfield. He's kind of the one-off on Pittsburgh that I do like. Evan Carter also interesting for Texas, though it's a tough matchup here. But if you want to use anybody from Texas, I think either him or shortstop and Corey Seager are the top overall options. So then let's move into our sub 3,000 price point guys. So we're going to start by looking at Romy Gonzalez here for Boston, as he does draw good metrics. He's my favorite sub 3,000 play and he can play shortstop for Boston at just $2,700. Obviously, he's a little bit risky, but Boston looks really solid today, and he's definitely in play. Grissom for second base at $2,300, and Cooper at Boston for $2,900 are the top three guys here. So Gonzalez, Grissom, and Cooper. They carry a lot of risk, though, so do keep that in mind. Now, Keibert Ruiz for Washington is only $2,400, and his matchup is okay. He's definitely somebody that I would consider as a cheap play to pay up at other positions. And then a kind of a Hail Mary play, Austin Hayes. If he gets into the starting lineup, then he could have some opportunity here in this one. But he definitely carried a lot of risk, as he's not been very good so far this season. Now let's get our stacks. So the way to use the stacks here is you put in the few players in the stack, then the 4 to 5 players in there, and then build around them, and that includes pitching and otherwise. So we have 3 top overall stacks with Seattle, Boston, Atlanta. All 3 of these teams that have absolutely fantastic metrics. All 3 of these teams have a bit boost to the right-handed hitters as well, so to keep that in mind. For Seattle, Haniger, Garver, Moore, France, and then one of these other 3 like Rodriguez or Polanco or Crawford. I think the top 4 are really good. It's just trying to figure out that 5th guy is going to be a little bit harder today. For Boston, Refsnyder, Devers, and Cooper all are top tier options. And then you can mix and match Gonzalez, Grisham, and Rafala there. For Atlanta, Acuna, Albies, and d'Arnaud are all in play, but Olsen and Ozuna both have their metrics are almost identical. And then Arcia and Duvall are cheap plays that have good upside on this one. The righties do get a boost in this game as well, so that does give some opportunities. But I do think it's a very good stack. It's going to be hard to determine how to do that with not spending a crazy amount of money, I should say. For Milwaukee, Tampa Bay, and Washington, they're good secondary stacks. They do have good matchup metrics here, but they do carry a little bit riskier situations because they're going up against decent pitching today. But I do think these 3 stacks have a lot of potential. Yelich, Frelick, Turang, and Bowers all jump off the page as really good options, and then finding your 5th guy is a little bit harder, but there's plenty of guys that have good metrics for the game. For the Tampa Bay, Diaz, Arizona, Lowe, Paredes, and Siri look decent today. I don't love this stack. I think Siri's the one-off guy that you could probably avoid if you just wanted to go 4-player stack, but it definitely has some potential. For Washington, Abrams, Garcia Jr., Gallo, Rosario, and then Ruiz or Winker. Now, I like Ruiz better. This stack is actually really good. It looks really solid. I really wanted to utilize the pitching against Washington, but they just look too good right now, I think, in this game. So I'm probably going to avoid the pitching there for the most part. And the next few stacks, Minnesota, Kansas City, Baltimore, San Francisco, and Texas. The Minnesota and Texas stacks are kind of high risk, high reward. But the Kansas City, Baltimore, and San Francisco stacks, these guys all carry similar metrics to that Milwaukee through Washington stacks as kind of secondary stacks as well. With Witt Jr., Pasquinto, Perez, Velasquez, and then either Melendez, Renfroe, or Garcia. I think that's a pretty decent stack. I do like the Baltimore stack and Mountcastle, Santander, Rutschman, and then 2 of the final 3 there, though. But it's definitely carrying some risk, as I do like the pitching there. For San Francisco, and Soler, Chapman, Matos, Bailey, and then either Estrada, Lucino, or Flores. This stack is rough, but it's, if you just got to find ways to find a stack in these lineups. I wouldn't hate going up against San Francisco from a pitching perspective today either. For these bottom 3 stacks, the Mets, Pittsburgh, and Chicago White Sox, these are Hail Mary stacks. I do like a couple bats from the Mets, but it's definitely a hard situation there. For Pittsburgh, we do have one bat in Joe or Reynolds that look okay, but it's definitely a high risk, high reward stack. And the White Sox, I mean, my goodness, this lineup is terrible, and the stack is also pretty terrible. So, but crazy things happen in baseball. Maybe we can see the White Sox get to Bradish, and then that be the stack of the day. So with that said, guys,